Alright folks, so I wanted to do this video while my daughter is in the other room playing Bow on the Go as loud as she can on the TV. Wanted to talk a little bit about Amazon, which is a Seattle-based company that is wanting to open up a second headquarters. And they're looking for the right city in North America of where they want to go. So I was looking at, because I'm from many different places. I was born and raised in Bowling Green, Kentucky. I lived for about 10 years in Indianapolis. Prior to that, in between that time, I lived for maybe a few months in Cincinnati. Then moved to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and lived there for about 3 years, bought a house and everything, and then moved to Seattle, lived there for about 3 years, and now down here in Tacoma, which obviously, if you know about geography, up here it's not that far. But I was reading newspapers from these different areas and that type of thing, because I always do that. I want to check up on what's going on in those places. And so I hear the information about Amazon wanting to open up a second headquarters. Now, I was reading the comments of what people were saying about where it should go and where they are saying it should be. And I'm going to offer my opinion as to why most cities in the United States are not going to meet Amazon's requirements. If you've seen Amazon's headquarters here in Seattle, it is a massive area. It basically, if you got rid of all of downtown Seattle and you looked at Amazon's headquarters, which is right there in downtown, it would be a city on its own. There's so many high-rise buildings just in that one footprint. So it's not, most cities are not going to meet the requirement, and there's many reasons for that. Amazon is looking for major incentives in order to build up an area. To give you an idea, Amazon really has been the push for the economy here. Places as far away as Tacoma and down to Olympia, which is a long way from Seattle, the housing prices here have skyrocketed, mainly due to Amazon. And you can look at even in Seattle itself, and the prices of homes are just going haywire. They're up 30% from, I think it was the year before or a couple of years before, something in the newspaper about that. So there's homes now in Seattle that the average price is over $670,000. Prices here in Tacoma are now, the average is over 300 something. You won't find a dump in Seattle for 200,000. Just doesn't exist. So first off, Amazon wants a international city. Now this is what's going to exclude a lot of cities, because people think that just because you have a flight that goes to Canada or a flight that goes to Mexico, that counts. That doesn't count. Amazon, if you look at SeaTac, we have connections to Japan and Hong Kong. I mean, we're talking direct flights to Japan, Hong Kong, and Shanghai, Seoul, Korea. We have direct flights to Paris. We have direct flights to London. We have direct flights to Mexico City. So all these different places in Europe, direct flights, and places, Dubai, we have direct flights. So Amazon is probably looking for a city that is similar. So that's going to knock out a huge amount of cities. It's looking for a state that can afford the incentives. That's going to knock out a huge amount of cities. And it's looking for a population that is mostly about 1 million people in the metro area. So the city itself would be 1 million, or maybe counting the suburbs, it would be at least 1 million people. That's going to knock out a lot of people. And the biggest thing is mass transit. Amazon's big on mass transit, and we're not talking just buses. And we're not talking just a commuter train. It's looking for a full-fledged mass transit system. They even financed partially the South Lake Union streetcar. That was the first one built in Seattle, modern one, and they helped finance that so they go directly to their campus. It's looking for a downtown that is very active. So that means a lot of stores and shops and things like that. Amazon builds a lot of structures and buildings, but for office space. It doesn't build a lot of retail spaces and a lot of places for people to stay on campus and eat. They want people to go throughout a downtown area and be able to be immersed in the culture. It's looking for a pretty open-minded city. So that knocks out a tremendous amount of cities. Let's talk about first dealing with the places here on the West Coast. Now, I don't know where, I'll plug this in because it's going to die, where Amazon is going to focus their energy on, to be honest with you. I don't know. I don't work for Amazon. But I can tell you this. Alaska and Hawaii, they don't make the list. For one, they're both pretty isolated and hard to get to. Yeah, Hawaii has an international airport that goes to many different places, but it doesn't have a huge amount of tech folks there, and that's something that they're also looking for. We're not talking just an area that has started to attract a lot of tech workers. We're talking a large amount of tech workers. So those two cities, just based on the parameters, just don't make the cut. Or those two states, I should say, don't make the cut. Tacoma would probably make sense, but again, it's so close to Seattle, it's kind of pointless. I'm sorry, you can't see me. It's so close to Seattle, so it's kind of pointless to just put another headquarters right here. But it has all of what basically Amazon's looking for. Portland, it does have a lot of what Amazon's looking for. It has all of the tech people and everything, but it's just too close to Seattle. It doesn't make sense. And then when we look at San Francisco, it's ideal. But again, it's on the same coast, same with Los Angeles, same with San Diego. So it's probably certain that the West Coast is not going to be it. Even though a lot of cities here would easily fit those requirements and easily be able to afford the incentives. The next place would probably be none of the Plains states because they just don't have the population requirement or the tech requirement, and maybe not the financial requirements. I mean, they're talking putting in billions of dollars of investment, so they're needing a lot of money as far as tax breaks and incentives. So a state would have to be able to absorb that and still function. The next state that would make probably great sense, or city, should be Denver. Denver, Colorado does have the mass transit aspect, does have the open-mindedness, does have a very active downtown and places for people to go and eat and do all those types of things. They could easily absorb that. It has a lot of international flights. It has a lot of tech workers, but it's, again, kind of close to Seattle. So I don't know if they're wanting something more eastern. So I don't know if Denver would be it, but it would make good sense. Let's look at probably Phoenix, Arizona. Probably not. Phoenix does have all of those requirements, but the tech worker part, yeah, there's a lot of tech there, but it's not. I think people have to understand you need to have thousands and thousands. We're talking double digits of tech workers that are needed for you to attract something like an Amazon. And I don't know if it has those high volumes of people. Amazon doesn't want to just have a lot of people coming into a city. They need to already be there. Then when it comes to Dallas, Texas, that makes good sense. But again, it might be a little bit too Western. It has everything that Amazon would want and need. A state is also big enough to absorb the tax breaks and incentives as well as the city. Houston, it possibly would work, but Houston has an issue with being so close to the water, natural disasters, hurricanes, things like that. I would think that probably that may not work because they're wanting a headquarters that doesn't have to be under the gun, so to speak, every season as far as natural disasters go. When it comes to, let's see, St. Louis, I don't think it's really that active enough. It does have mass transit, but it's not, I don't think it's ideal for Amazon. If some people say Indianapolis. Indianapolis is way too small. It doesn't have a large enough tech base. I can tell you that right off the bat. It doesn't have a lot of, it just doesn't have the right attitude for an Amazon. It can't absorb the tax breaks that Amazon's looking for. It's not an international city. They just now got a flight to Paris, but that's not enough. I just don't see Amazon making the cut, or I'm sorry, Indianapolis making the cut. I don't see Nashville or Louisville making the cut. I don't see Cincinnati making the cut either. An odd one would be Detroit. I could see that actually making the cut because Detroit has really started to focus on its IT, and it has, because back in the day, it has a huge international airport presence, and it's trying to revitalize its downtown. I could see that happening. Don't know if they have the tax breaks in the state that would be able to handle it. It would be a good contender. Chicago makes the perfect sense because it's Chicago. I would say Atlanta makes perfect sense. It has the requirements that Amazon's looking for. Boston, people were mentioning Wilmington, Delaware. Not going to happen. Charlotte, North Carolina, maybe, but doubtful. I don't know if it really has everything that Amazon's looking for, but it's a high possibility, and it is on the East Coast. New York City makes sense, but the property, cost of acquiring property is pretty high. Don't know if that's going to happen. Same with Boston. Florida, I would probably rule everything out because Florida does not invest in mass transit. The only place that has decent, well, I wouldn't even say decent, would be Miami. And again, it's so close to Hurricane Alley, I doubt that that would be the case. I would say probably it will be a Chicago. Makes perfect sense. I would say it probably would be maybe a Detroit. That makes good sense. And I would say maybe Boston. That would make good sense. Those places I would say makes perfect sense. It's doubtful it would be Washington, D.C. It's very doubtful it would be something like a Baltimore. They just, I don't think that's what Amazon's looking for. And I say that only because when you live here, you kind of have an idea of kind of what the Amazon culture is all about. And just some of those places I've been to and just the way the cities are, I just don't see it. Some people said Austin, Texas. Austin doesn't have any mass transit. I mean, it has a commuter rail system, but it's weak. And Austin doesn't have a lot of international flights to key places that Amazon's looking for. So you need to, for a city to really be competitive, there needs to be multiple flights to different parts of Asia, which is where a lot of tech folks are coming from, and specialists. A lot of flights to Europe, places like that. If cities don't have that, it's pretty much not even going to be a place that's looked at. I could be completely wrong, but if a company is going to invest like $50 billion in buildings, they need to have a culture that makes sense to them. And the incentives, the biggest thing before geography is incentives. That's what they're looking for. And then the talent. Do they have the people there? To keep it in perspective, Seattle has one of the highest college grad rates in the country. Most of the population up there have had some sort of college or graduated from it. That gives you an idea. They're looking for a very highly educated city. So again, places like Boston do come to mind, but Boston's kind of pricey too. So I don't know. Those are my thoughts. Don't know at all. I could be completely wrong, but this is just kind of what I have seen as far as Amazon, and what they've done to South Lake Union is just tremendous. And what they've done to the entire region is tremendous. So anyway, that's pretty much it. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and until next time, I will see you. Take care. I forgot to add this part. There is a, let me fix that light, my bad. There is another option. I mentioned the United States, but they said North America, so that could include Canada. It makes much more sense for Amazon to include places up in Canada, and I tell you the reason why. Canadian cities, all of the big cities have great mass transit. I mean, if you look at Vancouver, game over. There's very few cities here that can compete with, heck, I mean, Seattle can't compete with Vancouver. So Vancouver is probably a good option, but again, it's on the West Coast, same time zone. You know, there's Quebec, there's Montreal. You know, Canada could be another option because they have the talent, they have the mass transit, they have the money, the finances, they have the international flights to connect you everywhere. So that could be a possibility. So I forgot to put that in, so I wanted to insert that part in. Canada would probably be a good choice, especially when you look at just some of the dynamics that places like Quebec and Montreal have. Just look at some of what the investments that they've done over the years, and just the type of cities that they are. They're international cities through and through. Places like Vancouver have, stock markets, and they have a massive, unique mass transit system that Seattle envies. So I would say that would be a great option too. So to narrow it down and to cut to the chase, Vancouver, Montreal, Quebec would probably make sense. I can't think of any other big Canadian cities. And I would say San Francisco would make sense, but again, expensive. San Jose, that area, again, expensive. Los Angeles, San Diego, again, expensive, all on the same coast. Denver would make a whole lot of sense. Dallas, Texas would make a whole lot of sense. Atlanta, Georgia would make a whole lot of sense. Charlotte is kind of iffy. And then it would definitely make sense for Chicago, Detroit, New York, Boston. Those are the cities that I would say probably would make the best sense for what Amazon's looking for. So now it truly is it. And until next time, I will see you. Take care.